Good afternoon. It's Scott Lang here, President of Visionary Philanthropic Consulting. I'm here with my colleagues and consultants, Jason Blumenthal, Ava Willis-Barksdale, and Michael Shipham. We're going to spend some time today talking in part about things we've discussed before, i.e., the Fundraising Effectiveness Project, which we reviewed in May, and the Giving USA report, which we reviewed in June. Here we are a month later, and the question becomes, what do we do with all this information? And so let me quickly share my screen and we'll get the slide deck up in front of everyone and get started. We plan to review some data here that's going to be uh, informative, and then we're going to engage in a conversation so that we all have an opportunity to explore this in more detail. So to start off, we're going to do welcome and introductions, talk about the data, and include in that the implications of the new tax law, the big beautiful bill, and then what do we do in response relative to retaining donors, upgrading donors, and discovering. Um, our first two panelists, Ava Willis-Barksdale and Michael, have been with us before, but Ava, why don't you say hello and a quick background?
Well, hello, everyone. It's good to be back on another webinar with Visionary. And of course, I serve as a senior consultant with Visionary, but my day job is that I serve at my alma mater as the Vice President for University Advancement. All of that stuff that is written there is true. And I enjoy doing what I do, but I will push my time forward so that Michael can introduce himself.
Thank you, Ava. Hi, Michael Shipham. I'm our chief consultant for higher ed, although I do work with all of our clients across the board with a focus here mostly on the analytics side and in giving, particularly in the areas of annual and annual leadership, major gifts, and plan giving. Likewise, what is here is correct. Have more campaign experience than is shown here. So if you want to know more, feel free to check out my profile on LinkedIn. I'm open network there. So if you want to connect, send me an invite and happy to connect.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael. Now to Jason.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jason. Yeah, also everything is accurate on mine. I'm reading it now. Uh, I'm one of the principals at Visionary, have been since the beginning. It's my day job along with doing research and assisting ultra high net worth individuals and families. So I've got a nice little crossover with them. Look forward to chatting about this today.
Well, and Jason, we have to admit you also have an interest in playing a little poker. You just got back, I understand, from a trip.
I did. I got back late last night from friendly Las Vegas, and
America's
didn't
Playground.
didn't lose all my money. So
There you go.
that's yes, and in a poker tournament, yes, I do enjoy that from time to time. Yes.
So perfect. And I'm Scott Lang, sort of the beneficiary of all these variety of friendships and relationships, which enabled us to put me at the hub of the Visionary Philanthropy spoke and wheel. Um, Charlotte McGee once called me the father of prospect management because I had created a software product called Gifted Memory back in the day, which reinforced the behaviors associated with successful major gift solicitation. On the speaking side, I was involved with both CASE and AFP, recently served as a member of the board of the Fundraising Effectiveness Project, and now I'm on the editorial review board of Giving USA. So I think we have perhaps better insight in terms of the philanthropic landscape than some others based on our hands-on involvement there. But I don't want to spend too much time about me. I want to talk more about the data. And the unfortunate circumstance is that over the course of the last 10 years, overall, the number of donors in the United States has declined. And this is replicated in Canada, in the UK, in Australia, and in other places where this kind of data is collected. Fundraising Effectiveness Project does it uniquely because they've got an amalgamated data set of actual gift transactions that are anonymized. So they're looking at the same donor year over year for the last 10 years. You'll notice that 2020 was a spike because people that were inclined to help during COVID did so. So that was an extraordinary event, which has not been replicated since, as you can see by the decline of 6%, the decline of 10%, decline of 1%, and then this past year we reported a 6% decline. Now, how that translates is that most of the decline is with those people who give the fewest number of gifts. This probably is not counterintuitive to anybody, but it's interesting to note that people that make 7 or more gifts um, have had the smallest decrease in number, but they only represent 9% of the donors, right? So the majority of the donors, almost 70% of the donors, are people who make one-time gifts. The problem is we're not retaining them. We're not keeping them. So the implication is we need to do a better job of keeping people and getting them to make more gifts. The other thing is if you look at donations by the size of the gift, the large donors only represent less than 0.5% of the donor population. The donors between $1 and $100 represent over half, almost 51% of the total. Yet that's where the greatest decrease is. The one place where there was an increase was in the supersize, the $50,000 gifts. But what I want you to get out of this slide is the larger the gift, the more likely they are to stay with you. So when you start looking at the $500, $1,000 level, you can see an impact there. And we'll get into that later when Michael starts talking about recurring giving programs. This is the issue that we each need to address because there's been a decline year over year in the terms of the number of new donors that we retain. The newly retained donor, you may not be familiar with this language, but the person who made their first gift last year, who gave again, would be a newly retained donor. A repeat retained donor would be someone who's given, say, 3 years in a row, and then they drop off. So 7% decline in new donors, 8% decline in newly retained. I mean, we didn't keep them 2 years in a row. Almost 5% for the repeat, and then 4.5% decline in the recaptured. So we're getting better as people are there longer, but we're losing in every category, right? So if we were to stand up in front of the judge, we would have to say we're guilty. We're not keeping donors the way we should be. The retention rate is horrible. It's 42% overall. Now, on the flip side of that, Giving USA this past year reported stronger giving dollars, $592 billion. And interestingly enough, it increased in every category except for bequests. You can see on the left-hand side there, well, left-hand side is current dollars, right-hand side is inflation-adjusted dollars, but that's where we had the biggest decline. Everything else increased in terms of dollars, with the exception of foundations. When you look at inflation-adjusted dollars over a 1 year period, over since 2022, there was an increase. And then for grins and giggles, what we see here is the increase by sector. education increasing by 13%, public society benefit increasing by 19, international affairs by 17, environment and animals by 7. So interesting stats. A friend once said, if you follow this trend, both at Fundraising Effectiveness Project and Giving USA, you'll get to a point where the number of donors declines so much that we'll end up with one person giving all the money. And so as professional fundraisers, what we want to do is we want to ensure that that does not happen. In fact, our mission at Visionary Philanthropic Consulting is to increase generosity and do a better job of expanding our universe. So Jason, you're the academic amongst us. Why don't you tell us what happened to the big, beautiful bill?
Sure. There's a lot of information going around. Let's start with that. There were many proposals in it. There were many things that people thought was going to happen. So we're going to talk about what actually happened. And if you look at the screen, I don't need to read it for you, but the deduction for non-itemizers is now $1,000 or $2,000. What that means is if you don't itemize, your donors can do $1,000 or $2,000, where that didn't happen before. So that is good. That should increase donations if we are talking to the potential donors and explaining this to them, or their financial advisors are. So it's a pretty simple thing. Now you can deduct this. Great. Where you couldn't before. Or next.
Well, is there an
Yeah.
implication that they can take the deduction and they might not actually write the check to the church, college, or the Humane Society?
One would hope they do make the donation, and theoretically they have to have a receipt. They just don't need to itemize it. But yes, that is a realistic concern, which
Okay.
would then cause donations to go down. And historically, that has happened in the past. And that is fair. A couple of the new things that have happened is these floors have been put in. So, the AGI, which is your adjusted gross income, meaning that the first 0.5% of your adjusted gross income for individuals is no longer deductible. This is in the itemized side if you're going to larger. So you have to give more than 0.5% to do it. The marginal tax rate for the high, again, is the same thing. It's only at 35%. So you look at the numbers, you can donate whatever you want. Now, here's another piece to this, which is you could do 50%, only 37% but you can go forward 5 years. So you could take the rest of that the next year or the year after or the year after. I see another implication of this, other than this, is it could be a benefit for donor advised funds. Right? We're going to hit that number and we're going to just dump it into a donor advised fund. And then over the next 3 years, we'll take it. So the whole point of the donor advised fund in the past was you dump it in, you get that one-time credit, and you get it. Now you can actually space that out. So again, pretty logical. You get a tax credit for school choice. We know what that means. The cap on public charity, it's still at 60%.
So no change there.
So no real change there. The estimate, again, no real change there. And for the most part, we've talked about these before, the things that we've just spoken about really don't impact your $1 million givers. They've already got things in trusts. They've got tax advisors that over the years have been structuring these things. It's the $1,000 to $5,000 to $20,000 giver it still adds up, but that's what we're talking about here.
Talk about the estate tax change.
Yeah, so it goes from 13.9 to 15 million per person. So if you're married, it's 30 million. And that's, you can have an estate of 13.9 million or 15 million or two 15 millions if you're married before you're taxed. The likelihood is, I'm an economics guy. So what I look at is historical trends. And if you go back to when the first, estate tax was done, which was what, 1797, and you go through and you look at all the changes, every single time, not most of the time, not sometimes, every single time, there has been an adjustment in the tax level. It's been a 1 to 2% change on bequests. And it's a 2 to 1. So for every 1% there is in the tax, there's been a 2%, 1.7 to 2.3, if we want to be accurate
In the estate.
overall. In the estate, the amount of bequests, up
And
or
you're
down.
referring to a negative change.
Not always. That's the thing. This is why economically it really cements the realism of this, which is every time the number goes up before you're taxed, the amount of bequests go down, because tax people say, oh, you don't have to give the money away. It's not going to be taxed. If they lower the tax number and go from 10 to 8 million, then the amount of bequests go up by that 2 to 1 rate. So it's every single time. So while I never feel confident saying, here's what's going to happen in the future based on the past, right? We can say, here's what we think is most likely, and you always give the consultant language to cover yourself. This is one where we feel confident,
But
because
if you've got $15 million in an
yes,
estate, you can pass that on
yes,
to your children and not pay any tax on it, or to whomever.
correct. You can pay $14,999,999 without it being taxed now.
Okay.
And it was 13,900,000.
So then
Correct.
tell us about the change in the donor advised funds.
So they're no longer part of the universal deduction program. Let's boil it down to this. Everything in this benefits the idea of giving money to donor advised funds. You can put the money into it now because it's now part of the deduction. You get all these other reasons. You can go forward 5 years. Corporations can now put into them more without there being any issues. Here's the big caveat on this, which we didn't put in there. We're expecting any day now the IRS to announce their new donor advised fund rulings, which could have a huge impact or may not have any impact. If you listen to what the hearings were and what they were saying, they were going to put much tighter rules, and you had to give more money. And it turns out, and I'll do this real briefly, there was this little loophole where family members were getting hired on as advisors and getting paid 15% to 20% and making hundreds of thousands of dollars to millions of dollars. And that loophole will likely be cut. And it will be anything more than 1 to 1.5%. You will be taxed at 25 to 30%.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And then the corporate charitable giving.
Yeah. So there's a new floor there, which is similar to the individual where it's 0.5%. Now it's 1%. This will likely impact the smaller businesses, the neighborhood hardware store that was donating jerseys to the sporting team, or the community fundraiser where all the businesses each kicked in. They cannot take a tax donation unless it's 1% of their revenue
Okay.
anymore. And it's maxed out at 10%. But again, they can put it into a donor advised fund and they can go forward 5 years.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. So we've got these three data sets: FEP, Giving USA, and the bill. And so, Michael, where do you start? You're in your swivel chair in the office. What do you do first?
Well, I think the first thing you have to do is take a good hard look at your data, because your list is the most important asset that any organization or institution that raises money has. When was the last time that list was clean? When was the last time you utilized a service like Accurate Append to update all your cell phone and email data? When was the last time you screened it for wealth appendage? In the work we do here for analytics for our clients, there's two very good services that we use, either iWave or Donor Search. iWave is quite good. They have a tendency to be a little bit less expensive. They also have a few less of the bells and whistles that Donor Search has. So depending upon your budget, take a look and then decide whether or not you can update your file. And if you're going to send your file in for third-party donor append, send in the whole file. Don't limit it to just your donors of the past 2 or 3 years. Send in the whole file, because you have no idea what diamonds could be working there. However, just getting the file back from a third-party wealth identification firm is not enough. You have to go in and you have to analyze the data. Too often, folks get the data back from iWave. They look at the top sheet that says they have a philanthropic potential of, say, 500 million. Everybody gets real excited, and then they get into the data and they have a very hard time interpreting it. So if you're going to do a data append, you should work with somebody like us who can help you interpret that data and then take that data and put it into actionable steps. Identify those prospects or donors who are giving now but are capable of giving more. Identify those cohorts that would be appropriate for leadership and annual, for major gifts, for leadership gifts, for bequest giving, and then start a process. But the first thing you have to do is know what's in your file. And it's not just the wealth writing, it's also you need to come up with an engagement score. You can have somebody with all the capacity in the world who's in your file, but if they're not philanthropic, they're not going to support you. But you can weight that by developing an engagement score that works for you. And there's just a few examples here. You can think of other things that are based upon your organization's mission and how folks interact. But if you're a college or university, are these people coming to events? Do they come to the president's luncheon? Do they attend homecoming? Do they sign up to volunteer? Are they a class agent? Research study over research study over research study has proven that the more engaged a prospect is, the more willing they are to consider and ask. Also, demographics. You just cannot send a dear colleague letter out to everybody in the file. You have to understand that different generations have different ways of communicating, and there's some very good free stuff on this. If you go online and just do a quick search that says, how do I talk to Gen X versus Z? How do I talk to millennials? They'll give you great examples of terms to use, and more importantly, terms not to use. So craft different appeals and segment your data based upon generational ranges.
And that would
Also,
also
start engaging in very personalized communication. These days, it's so inexpensive to sort data. You shouldn't be sending dear alumnus letters. Every email going out should be personalized to the teeth. It doesn't take that much to put name, address, spouse name, class year, all the data that you have. It doesn't cost that much to build that file and personalize the letter as much as possible. I'm sorry, Scott, were you saying something?
Yeah, the question is, do you have to segment by media as well? Like some people respond to text messages versus a phone call or
Well,
email?
that should be if you've been a good doing a good job of inputting gift data into your CRM, you'll see how people give. And donors like to select their method of giving. Some like to use the phone, some like to use mail, some like to use text, some like to use face to face. You get a lot of text on like a giving day for your school. Um, but if people have already identified to you their preference in giving, that's the most effective way to communicate with them.
And then,
Also, donors will let you know when they like to give. If you have a donor who for 3 years has been giving you a gift in the spring, don't approach them for a gift at calendar year end. You're just going to annoy them. Approach them for a gift in the season that they like to give.
that's good. And then, Ava, I recall we did a survey at Ursinus when you were there and asked people how they preferred to be communicated with, email, whatever.
Right.
It seems to me that if you ask the question on the operational side and you managed operations, don't you have to be able to follow through on that? And the person who says, send me an email, you have to send them an email, not a letter, or vice versa?
So, yeah, and there's also knowing, and this does tend to fall along generational lines, the people who really want that magazine, and they will tell you, then you need to be prepared then that you're going to print those magazines. We have been, and I've carried that kind of knowledge since that time, seeing what we got back in the Ursinus survey and looking at our donor population, our alumni population here, with the fine line on the generational piece, because we also find that people in my age group and a little older are becoming more savvy, but you only know that if you've built the relationship. So
Mm.
you can ask those pivotal questions, but knowing when you ask the question that you are then prepared to, do what it is that you find out from those kinds of survey questions. But you can also watch, as Michael has suggested, watch their behaviors already. How are they choosing to give? When are they choosing to give? What kind of conversations are they having with gift officers? Or are they just responding in a text or an email about something they've received? I have a young lady who calls me from time to time. I'm sure she's all of 85, who says, when I read things on social media, so then I start right there, right? What? And I look at who has said things. I look in the magazine that you send us at the end of the calendar year, and I look for the donor list. And if they're not on the donor list, I don't listen to anything. So there's an interesting dichotomy. You have a
Correct.
person that you wouldn't anticipate is reading posts on social media, but they also are relying on that hard copy magazine that she got at the end of a calendar year. So the relationship and knowing your file, critical.
And
Yeah.
just one comment to build on what Ava just said. If you survey your alumni, have the decency to not only thank them, but share the results of the survey with them. You've asked them for their opinion, share the survey back with them so they can see whether or not their opinion is shared by others or what buckets
Yeah.
everything falls into. Recognize the fact that they volunteered to participate. So unless it's super confidential, which a general survey should not be, share the data back with them. It's considerate.
that
But
spins directly into these stewardship pieces. Scott, I think you wanted me to take this one
yep, yep.
just to get it started. So thank you again to all your donors. Now we were talking about thanking them here on their gift giving, but to what Michael just added, also thanking them for participation in any way, whether you're thanking them for their, their gifts or their involvement, back to the engagement score, all of those things. Thank you is so critical. I've often said in verbal kinds of conversations that the original rule is still true. 7 times is really the, the rule we used to use. We want to thank people 7 times for a gift in various ways, right? One of the things that has been, it's complicated sometimes to do, but creating those impact reports. And again, with the increased skill and access of technological tools, creating impact reports is not quite as hard as it used to be. But when you send someone an individualized or provide to them even in, face-to-face, their impact report, what they've given over time, what the impact was, or even if you generalize it to last year, all of the money that we got in for annual giving impacted the institution in this way. We were able to do, I will tell you, on our campus, we had to replace a boiler in a dorm suddenly. Well, that was greatly assisted by annual fund dollars. So people then say, oh, okay, I get it. I need to just keep giving. So those impact reports and the return of the information, now you've asked them for something, they've told you, and you let them know what you got from them, and we thank them for it. And so then we are then doing thank yous in various ways. Yes, could be on the telephone, the videos that students or other clients, if you're talking about a different kind of organization, can produce that they can be rudimentary. They don't have to be super produced. They don't have to be in a studio or whatever, but sometimes on a phone, and you forward those to people who have been both donors and involved volunteers, can keep the people in your pocket or in your team or in your group of regular supporters. And then of course, the quick postcards and note cards, especially since now we typically do, especially for online givers, sort of an automatic response, an automatic receipt, which is, they see that it's generic. But for those that we've been working with, people we want to feel that special touch, I always write a handwritten note. So, and those things go a long way. They may seem like overkill, but they are important. The new donor welcome package is interesting because people who are giving for the first time or the first time in a long time maybe don't know that you're paying attention. And so when you write that new donor welcome package, and for younger donors, it catches their attention like, oh, I'm just not one of 1,000. I'm someone that it's worth, inviting and thanking in a special kind of way. We have for a long time remembered or tried to remember to respond to people on their anniversaries, on their birthdays. Of course, anniversaries can be tricky in case things have changed, but people's birthdays generally don't. And so birthdays, any other pivotal event, alums, we have, of course, those years, recognition years in alumni gatherings. And so if you can do group kinds of, we know this is your 20th year out, people are like, oh, wait, they knew it was me. So all of those and probably more will help keep your donors in the fold.
Yeah, I want to really emphasize this because I think my friend Ben Miller used the illustration of this donor retention issue as a leaky bucket. And if you've got a leaky bucket, you can do one of two things. You can pour more water in the top, but the water keeps leaking out, or you can patch the holes, right? And AFP did a survey. I think this may go back 4 or 5 years now, but I think the discovery was almost 70%, like 65, 68% of the responding organizations did not send thank you letters. They sent tax receipts to people for whom the IRS said you needed to send a tax receipt, Ava. So it was like, okay, 250 bucks and up, we'll send them a receipt. Well, a receipt is a cold thing. I get a receipt when I go to the grocery store. There's no love there. And so the act of sending a letter, or I remember my first job at Roanoke College, you know, taking Michael's advice, I took a look at the donor file, and there were 24 families that gave 80% of the money,
Mhm.
right? And so I said, okay, we got to treat these people well, and I got a challenge. I want each one of them to give more than they did the year before, like by double, and I wanted them to reach out to a friend. So the next year we had 42 people. But part of that was I cut a deal with the president of the college and I said, listen, anytime we get a gift in excess of $5,000 or $1,000, pick the number that makes sense for you. I need you to pick up the phone and call. And it was great because this is back in the day when people actually sent checks in. I would photocopy the check, put their phone number on the piece of paper, and Norm would come out of a meeting and said, "Oh man, I just came back out of this meeting with the math department and I see your gift here and it reinforces everything I heard the faculty talk about today. Thank you for entrusting us with this gift." It distinguished that school from everybody else, right? Because it was different. And I think the degree to which we can personalize the thank you, and that's why I like the concept of these thankathons with students and others reaching out. I just think it's significant to distinguish ourselves. And Jason, you've got experiences with some of your high net worth clients where, you know, they weren't solicited well, but more importantly, they weren't thanked well, or if at all, right? I mean, you
Yeah.
told about
Oh,
a
yeah.
December conversation, to whom should we give? And your question was,
Yeah, they were asking, going through the list. And I do this with multiple of the high net worth clients. At the end of the year, we look at who they've been giving to, and these are not the 7-figure, 8-figure. These are the smaller gifts. And one of them said, "All right, this one they sent in a request for my annual $10,000." The person looks at their secretary assistant and said, "What communications have we had with them?" And they pull it up and they said, all right, it looks like 4 or 5 times during the year they asked you for more money. One for this event, one to buy a sponsorship table, one's for this, one for this. Client friend says, anything else? Any emails from the president? Any emails? Nope, that's it. Client said, take them off the list. Say, you've been giving them $10,000 a year for 10 years. All they want is money. Stop thinking of them as a pocket purse. Stop thinking of thank them, thank them, thank them. And I have witnessed multiple cases where they've said, we're done. We're done.
but the person thanks them, takes them to lunch, buys them a cup of coffee, sends them a card.
Tells them what they're doing with the money. I just want to know what you're doing with my money. That's all they want to know. Yeah. And they
So
don't know.
So going back to the impact report, so if it's a specific gift for a specific thing, that's kind of easy. But Michael said earlier, if how do I send an impact report for the annual fund? That's current operations. Well, you got to come up with somebody who was impacted by it, right? Like we use the money for this new boiler that exploded, so the
Yep.
kids won't be cold on the weekend, right?
Yep.
Explain the use, show where it's going, show how much of that is offsetting other expenses in the revenue budget for the organization, and that how that's helping to improve, in this case, student life, so they don't freeze in the dorm.
That's perfect. So then, what about this concept of the recurring gift programs?
Recurring gifts work extremely well. There's kind of two forms. There's recurring gifts at the minimum is when you try to move your donors over to credit cards as opposed to checks or EFTs coming in. The nice thing about credit cards is that until the card expires, you're going to get that gift and that amount based upon however it was set up. So your retention rate gets to be very high. And what we've also found is that even when the card expires, if you have a good program and you're tracking the expiration dates on the cards, in about 7 to 8 weeks before the card expires, a communication goes out to the donor, thanking them for the gift, letting them know how important it is, reminding them that their card's going to expire, and please provide you with the new card or the new expiration date and code before it does expire. That works extremely well. Leadership Annual is a little bit more enhanced where you're asking your prospects and donors to either upgrade to a new level of giving or kind of codify a commitment for a specific time frame. If you have a bunch of donors who are giving you $1,000 a year, but you're investing time to renew those every single year, instead solicit them to make that same gift for 3 to 5 years. And what you're doing is you're doing site raising within the donor, so the donor no longer thinks of themselves as giving $1,000 a year. They're thinking of themselves of giving 5,000 as a pledge. At University of Rochester, when I was there for their $1.2 billion campaign, we had the George Eastman Society. And when this was launched, we expected no more than, say, 300 donors to it in total. The ranges went from a pledge of 7,500 over 5 years to $50,000. I'm sorry, $500,000 over 5 years. And at the end of the campaign, we were oversubscribed by over 3,000 donors to the program. These people were treated in a very special manner. They went to special recognition events for those who were local. It was a great way to network, meet other alumni, meet other friends. Went over very well with the Parents Council. Just a great tool. But for $125 a month, you can join, you can make a gift, and 5 years later, you've paid off a pledge at 7,500, and as opposed to, and now you're viewing yourself as a junior major gift donor, and you get cultivated as such. So it's high impact, high touch. Retention rates in these programs are very, very impressive, and I just like to ask Ava to share a little bit about what they're doing at her college with their Vanguard program.
So yes, I can share with you that all those things that Michael said are true about leadership annual giving. I can also say that there are a couple of other things that happened. When I arrived back at my alma mater in December of 2023, I was in the middle of a fiscal year, right? But I was beginning to look at who do we have that are recurring, not just month to month recurring, but every year at whatever level, right? This is something that, again, in our work at Ursinus, we started looking at growing their leadership annual giving group as well. And so we created the Vanguard Society to recognize donors that were giving at or above $1,000 every year, all the way up to the millions of dollars. So of course, the people in the $1 million rung are called luminaries. We created those layers in Vanguard. So you come in at $1,000 and you're just, I shouldn't say just, between 1,000 and 5,000 in a given year, you are seen as a leader. So that's leadership annual giving. But we name the rungs so that, and we have seen the psychology of this working, where donors will come into our building and they see the Vanguard Society sign and they say, well, how do I move up to this next one, and like, well, we can help you do that. And they also see people who are their peers or they don't see them. And they say, oh, I need to give a call to my friend or whatever. I've had a number of alums who call me and say, how many people in the society this year? Did we grow from last year? What are we doing? And so there is a healthy bit of conversation around it because we've opened the door for people to see the impact and why they give, and that it is every year we need that gift, or we need you as you perhaps acquire more ability to move up in those rungs. We've also, it's a source of pride for some people. We create a very inexpensive lapel pin, and the design changes every year. So just because you got your first Vanguard pin is not the pin that will be 5 years from now. You show up with that one, and we'll be proud that you have it, but you really need to have 5 by then because it will look different year over year. So the idea was to grow that leadership annual kind of middle, and allow people to see themselves in a ladder that they can increase in, to allow sometimes younger alums to say, I could do $1,000, even if I spread it out. This goes back to your month to month recurring gift over the year. $83.33 will get you there. And so, so we have found it this will be the 3rd year we'll recognize Vanguard donors, and the number has been increasing every year. So counterintuitive to the number of donors going down across the board, this group is growing. And so we expect that, yes, to impact our major givers, our planned givers, but leadership annual giving can be a powerful growth objective, and to determine what is your anticipated revenue year over year, because you have people in that pipeline and who have pledged over 3 to 5 years to stay in that group. So I don't know if that was all you needed to know, but
No, it's great because the other thing that this does is by having a well-defined, executed, well-run leadership annual giving program is that you're identifying your next generation of major gift donors. You're instilling a habit of giving. You continue to raise their sights as far as what they think they can afford to give, and through the recognition involved, you're bringing them closer in. So when it comes time for those that have the capacity to make larger gifts, when it comes time for that gift to be renewed for 4.5 years from now, for those who can, a lot of times that next task is an entry level major gift task. And a lot of major gift donors at U of R were also solicited for leadership and annual, because you need both revenue streams.
Yeah, those are good points. The things I like about this multi-year commitment is that you avoid the concept that Jason may have alluded to earlier, where the only time they talk to me is when they want a gift. Now what you do is you come back with, here's what we were able to do with your $2,000. And here's the impact that the 200 of you made with the $2,000 you each gave. So they're again, stewardship reports, you're building a relationship. And at the high end of this, Melanie Sablehouse in our firm, who co-founded the 2 most prolific women in philanthropy programs, Tiffany Circle and Women United, they started at $10,000. So they definitely identified affluent women in the organization, many of whom had not been solicited before. They'd been sort of overlooked for their husbands, or in some cases, their late husbands. And the program is a little more involved in that they look for things that the organization needs to accomplish to meet a specific needs during the course of the year, and vote on those and say, okay, here's the 1 or 2 things that we're going to address, and specifically go about asking people to invest in the cause to eliminate that particular issue. at the Red Cross, it was addressing a deficit in operations. Everybody responded to a fire or a flood or an earthquake, but didn't cover the cost of running the organization during the year. So, and that program has a 97% retention rate. So we talk about a problem with attrition. If you get people involved in these programs, it has a significant impact. Now, uh, Michael, talk about expanding. So if we spent a fair amount of time talking about um, retention. We got basically 10 minutes left to us. Let's talk about new donor acquisition. How can we go about this?
Acquisition is critical to continue to feed that pipeline. Um, direct mail has kind of fallen off in the past few years because everybody is emailing everyone to the point where email is losing its impact. Even text messaging is beginning to lose its impact. And it's easier for that stuff to get coded as spam as it's coming into your phone. Traditional direct mail, particularly with younger generations, is making a significant comeback for the unique reason that they're not used to receiving direct mail. Go figure. And what works well are crisp, nice packages. Don't use a nonprofit stamp. Use a first class stamp. Pay the postage. Get address correction on it. But it's a new way to communicate, and it's a great way to acquire donors in a medium that they've not traditionally received before. Also, phone. The telephone is the second most effective way to raise funds. It has fallen out of favor since about 10 years ago when Yale decided to close its telephone program. I remain a big proponent of calling. Not just to renew donors, but to acquire them, and also to get those ever important first visits for potential major gift prospects. You have to get them on the phone. If you try to do it via email, it's not going to work all that well for you. But institutions really need to reinvest in their calling programs. There are some now where the software is so sophisticated, the student caller can make the calls off their iPad from their dorm room, not having to step foot into the calling center. It's some of the new stuff being done is extremely good, and the results speak for themselves. They're positive, and they make money. The other most important thing is to work with the volunteers that you have them try to network in people that they know in the community within their personal network, have them feed names in, not just to identify a prospect, but to help you walk through that door when it's time to cultivate them. So it's not just you going in by yourself, but bring the person who has the relationship with the prospect with you for that ever important first visit. And find ways to the family that should know you your best are your donors. So find ways to bring them in. Create opportunities for them to volunteer. If it's a college move-in day, if it's a patient support day at a medical clinic, if it's restocking the food pantry, go to these donors and ask them to come in. And more times than not, they're more than willing to help. Jason, do you want to touch base, please, on the idea of research and targeted lists?
Yeah, so we're all limited in time. So we need to really use our time well, and really doing research to, like Michael said earlier, iWave and Donor Search are great and wonderful, but it's half of it. You need to actually look it up, see if these people are going to be interested in you. And by the way, no disrespect to ChatGPT or any of the AI things, those are not the tools to use for research. Recently, just for the heck of it, I went on to several of them and said, who owns private hospitals in the United States? And got this list of people, but it wasn't the people who owned them. It was the people who had naming rights. That doesn't help me at all. So it's just not good. Do the research. This crazy concept that I do and that we do, which is pick up the phone and call and ask people. People, first of all, like being asked questions. They like people like telling you things. So they like it. It helps them. Just call and ask, do the research, then be more targeted. Look at your direct mail, look at it and say, wow, these people aren't ever doing anything and they haven't in 10 years. Then maybe stop sending it to them. It's take the time to do the research. If you can't do it, hire someone like us to do it. It's just,
Purchase lists for people,
know.
for organizations, folks that are homeowners, have the capacity to get $100,000 or more, and have supported youth development, say.
Yeah.
And so you can
do it.
You can pinpoint a group and then do a test marketing and use that to feed the base end of your pipeline, correct?
Absolutely. There are multiple groups, Donor Search and 100 others that do very good targeted marketing lists.
Yep.
But again, that's half of it. Now you've got the list. Now what? You have to do the right message and you have to pay attention and track the response.
So, Jason, planned giving was the one area where revenue went down. And so we asked some questions like, well, did fewer people die?
Yeah. So I think the politically correct way to say it might be during COVID, there was an elevated amount of dying. So, yes, fewer people died because more of them died during COVID.
Okay.
Which meant that is why we got fewer now because we got more back then. The same number of, it's pretty weird, right? If you look at again economically, we know pretty much how many people are going to die every year in the United States to pretty close accuracy. COVID changed all that for a few years, but now we're back to where we are. People are also particularly on the higher end and no, I take that back. All across the board, every single thing is saying people are being more conservative with their money right now.
Mhm.
And are less likely to make significant commitments due to uncertainty.
So we've only got a couple minutes left and I want to blow through these next few slides, but there are ways in which you could put a template on your website for a simple codicil. You can tell people to include you as a beneficiary in your IRA. You don't even need a lawyer for that. You just put the name down. And we can do more education to get people thinking about a gift they can make after they pass. The impact of the tax law at one corporate companies, in order to deduct charitable giving, have to give at least 1% of their pre-tax profits now. The ironic thing is that's what they've been giving over the course of time. It's 1%. So I don't know if this is going to, help or hurt. But if you think about those corporations in your area that may benefit from what you do, it could be worth a conversation to talk about how they can get involved. And then, as you said, there's uncertainty in the economy, but there's also more competition. GoFundMe, which is an act of benevolence. Johnny, needs help because he's recuperating in the hospital. I can make a donation to help Johnny. But they've also created a donor advised fund, which could now in effect be, not just competition to State Street Bank or the local community foundation, but your own organization, right?
Yeah, it's GoFundMe. Again, like you said, it's benevolence, not 501c3. Their new donor advised fund, you can put any amount in. You want to do a $50 or $500 donor advised fund? go ahead. The only limitation to it is you have to give that money to a not-for-profit that has a page on GoFundMe.
Okay. So if you're not there, you're
Um,
not going to get it.
yeah, and you are limited to the investments being run by Vanguard or Schwab, three in each. But they are now directly competing against the community foundations and everyone else. Yeah, and they have a huge audience. Huge.
One of the those of you on the call know we submitted a survey. You know, what's keeping you up at night? Where are you focusing this next year? The number one issue of attention was AI, and I was on the phone this morning with a previous client at Cleveland State. They've introduced Ava, their AI generated, not Ava Willis Barksdale, but their AI advancement assistant. And Ava has a group of prospects who are rated, qualified, and never donated to the school and are not in anyone's portfolio. And people actually interact with Ava or not. And one of two things happen. Either they go into a pool that says, okay, let's ignore them and not spend any more time with this name and number, or let's get them into the annual giving program, or this person qualifies, let's assign them over to a member of our development team and they go into a gift officer's portfolio. This is one of the products that Givesy has come out with, and it's fascinating to me that people will interact with an artificial intelligent assistant. Unfortunately, we don't have time for Q&A. I'm hoping people will email some things in, but consider visiting us for a new vision on a new horizon. There's a lot we can do to help address these issues of concern, increasing your donor population, increasing alumni participation. We did that in consultation with Virginia Tech, got them to a new record high. We'd love to help. And of course, I want you to be able to reach out to any one of the colleagues here. Ava at Visionary Philanthropy, Jason at Visionary Philanthropy, Michael at Visionary Philanthropy. It's pretty easy to figure out how to get in touch with us. We're on the web. We're proud members of the Giving Institute. And thank you so much for spending your time with us today. God bless and have a great weekend.